that's our philosophy, at least at Air France, that the key of, let's say, a communication on sustainability at the level of the stakes, this communication has to be rigorous, it has to be science-based, it has to be honest and humble, because, as we said, the challenges ahead of us and for all airlines are quite high. There are still a lot of uncertainties, or at least challenges to overcome. And this communication has to be transparent.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. I'm your host, Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying. Every Thursday, I have important conversations with top aviation executives, technology entrepreneurs, and policymakers helping aviation take climate action. Conversations that help separate the signal from the noise. Whether you are a frequent flyer or an airline executive, if you care about sustainability or simply love traveling, welcome aboard. My guest today is Vincent Etchebehere, the Director of Sustainability and New Mobilities at Air France. He has had a fascinating career with the airline for 17 years, and he's recently pivoted his career to focus on sustainability using all of his experience working with Air France around the world in building a sustainable future. Some of the initiatives that we speak about are quite interesting indeed, from eco-piloting to the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Investment Strategy for Air France, and also the SkyTeam Sustainable Flight Challenge and how it's bringing multiple airlines and different people within Air France on board. Please join me in welcoming Vincent. Vincent, bonjour. It's finally good to be speaking with you. And you, of course, lead the sustainability charge at Air France. Tell me, how did you get into this role? I'm very curious about your journey to lead sustainability, because obviously this role did not even exist 10 years ago.
Actually, it did exist within Air France, because we built the sustainability office a bit more than 15 years ago. But let's say that 10 years ago, it probably did not have the same strategic dimension and the same scrutiny on than today. That is true. So to tell you a little bit about myself and how did I arrive in the sustainability field. So I've been working for Air France KLM for 17 years now. So time flies. I worked 14 years in the commercial domain. I had the chance, the luck to have extremely fascinating experiences and positions. Lately, I was general manager for Air France KLM in Mexico during 2 years and a half, then in Canada, based in Montreal, during 2 years. And it was actually when I was in Mexico, and even more so probably in Canada, that personally I tried to get informed, and I started to learn about climate change, about environmental challenges. And it became clear to me, first of all, that I wanted personally to work on those problematics and have the biggest impact I could. And second, it also became clear to me that for the airline industry, those problematics would be absolutely key for the future of airlines, for the future of their strategy, and for the way forward. So that's why I choose to, let's say, go out of the commercial family where I felt extremely well, but in order to dedicate myself specifically on sustainability topics.
I'm wondering, did this role already exist, or did you create this role at Air France based on your own interest and passion?
It did exist, but when I took the position, we, let's say, enlarged a little bit the scope. Especially, we integrated into the scope of my team something that we might talk about later on, which is what we call new mobilities, which consist in the short term in a big focus on intermodality, and especially strengthening the links between railway operators and Air France. On top, of course, on all our other decarbonization efforts, and more generally, on top of our sustainability ambition, which covers, as you know, a wide range of topics, from biodiversity protection, the handling of waste, the reduction of our noise footprint, and of course, our CO2 emissions reduction targets.
Wow. So your title is actually Future of Mobility and your focus is on intermodality. Why don't we start with that? Last year, Star Alliance announced that Deutsche Bahn will join Star Alliance. It's the first train company to join an airline alliance. And I believe Lufthansa does code shares with Deutsche Bahn already. What are some of the collaborations you are doing within France? Does Air France and TGV do any code shares, or Thales or any other train? What's happening there? Can we see a train company join SkyTeam in the future?
So thank you for the question. Actually, the cooperation between Air France and SNCF, which is the national French railway company, dates a long time already, because we started to code share between both actors in 1995.
Wow.
So it's a long history, which, of course, from that time already was answering a need from our customers who wanted to combine in a smooth and easy way a train segment, a high-speed train leg with a medium haul or long haul flight. But what we have been doing and what we continue to do for now the past 3 years is to strongly reinforce this partnership. So in the last 2 years, we have been, first of all, extending the number of code shares that we have. So now we have code shares with 33 high-speed train routes in France, to be precise. And we will continue to develop the number of those routes in this year, and of course in the years forward, because we see a real appetite from our customers for this joint product. And next to that, we are also, we fulfilled an important step at the end of last year in our relationship with SNCF and in this joint product, which is called Train plus Air, because we managed to now offer a fully digitalized customer pathway. So now our customers can do e-check-in, especially for both their train segment and their flight, which was not possible before, and that was actually one of their main expectations when it comes to combine rail and flight service.
Wow. So you're saying I can fly from Montreal to Paris on Air France and connect onto a SNCF train, let's say to Lyon, and have the boarding pass issued at the time of check-in in Montreal?
Absolutely.
That is extremely customer friendly.
Absolutely. And since November 2022, so you don't have, before you take your train at the point of connection or at the beginning of your journey, you don't have to go to a physical counter from SNCF, and you can have directly your boarding pass for both your flight and train directly on your phone, and have gain time and let's say have a smoother journey.
Wow, I really love this because I know of airlines that can't even do it between two airlines right now. So it's great to see you doing this with the train. Now, a lot of this I know is driven by government policy, and France and the European Union have some of the strongest policies when it comes to sustainability. For example, in France, I believe the government has banned short haul flights of less than 2.5 hours, whereas we see a conflict here where in the UK regional flights are given incentives with lower taxes. So London to Edinburgh, for example, is now cheaper. Where do you stand on this? I mean, France is taking one direction, the UK is taking one direction. You're very close to each other. How does an airline make sense of all of this?
Well, it does, while looking and meeting its let's say, first of all, of course, the regulation, but also the customers' behaviors, and those are changing. We saw that especially in France, but actually not only. We saw that new behaviors were starting to rise or to change before the COVID crisis. For sure, we can say that the COVID crisis, at least that's what we witnessed, actually accelerated those new customers' behaviors, or let's say the new behaviors of a growing part of our customers base. And those new behaviors also aim at being more mindful of the total footprint of their journey and trying to minimize the overall footprint as much as possible. And this includes, for example, traveling maybe less often, but staying more in situ in the destination, combining business travel and leisure travels. And we see that especially on our French domestic network, and favoring a train when such alternative exists, in combination when it comes to medium or long haul travels in connection with a flight, which in parallel, of course, we are working hard to minimize and to reduce the carbon footprint of.
We dived right into the intermodality part because you spoke about it. What if we zoom out a little? What are some of the key pillars for Air France's sustainability strategy? Not just the future of mobility, but overall getting to net zero by 2050. What are some of the key pillars, if you can run us through that, please?
First of all, we took last year actually CO2 emissions reduction target of minus 30% of CO2 per passenger kilometer versus 2019. That's a very ambitious target. And our main levers in order to achieve this target is, first of all, our fleet renewal. So as you know, buying new generation aircraft enables to reduce CO2 emissions. We are in a very voluntarist trajectory of fleet renewal. We had 4% of new generation aircraft in our fleet in 2019. We'll pass at 30% at the end of this year, 45% in 2025, and 70% by 2030. So it's a major move. Of course, it's major investments as well. It's more than 1 billion euros per year that solely the airline Air France is investing in, but that will play a prevalent role in our 2030 target. Our second lever, which we are also accelerating, and actually our pilots, our colleague pilots are extremely engaged on this one, is everything that we call eco-piloting or operational measures. So all and the combination of the different initiatives that they can take in coordination as well with their ground colleagues in order to minimize the fuel consumption on each and every flight. It ranges from cutting one engine when the aircraft is taxiing, also when the aircraft is on the ground, using ground electric power versus the energy of the aircraft. It of course includes the optimization of flight trajectories and continuous descent. And all those measures combined already today, they enable, so not in 10 years, not in 20 years, but today it enables us to reach 4 to 5% CO2 emissions reduction per flight. And we are actively working on going even further and as soon as possible. The third pillar, we already described it, it's intermodality, which will play an important role in our decarbonization roadmap. And I would say last but not least, because it's not a silver bullet, because at the end the decarbonization of the sector is a combination of all levers. But I think there is a convergence in the industry to say that this last lever will be the decisive factor for airlines decarbonization is of course sustainable aviation fuel. So the integration of those new fuels that enable, on average, at least for the SAF that we use, on average to reduce CO2 emissions by 80% on their full life cycle versus kerosene. And there we are working extremely hard, and not only us in sustainability, and that's also why it's quite a fantastic adventure. We are working internally with our procurement team, with our flight ops colleagues and all the entities that are concerned, but also externally with more and more potential partners, airports, of course, aircraft manufacturer, motorists, in order to share our knowledge and vision on that. And on SAF, two figures maybe to be concrete. First of all, in 2022, and I will give you a figure at Air France KLM level because we have a fully joint strategy on that. We already integrated more than 1% of our total jet fuel being SAF. So we consumed in 2022 around 17%, 17, of the SAF that was globally available. So when you know that Air France KLM share of jet fuel worldwide is 3%, it means that we went much higher in terms of our SAF market share, if I can say like that. And it is important for us because we want, that's a big part of our strategy, we want in the very short term, right now, to do our utmost in terms of stimulating the demand for SAF because we see it's a critical path in order to scale up the production that we will need in the future. And the second side is that we have a target, a SAF incorporation target of at least 10% by 2030. So going actually quite above, largely above the European mandates, which are being decided. And in order to, as a step in this direction, we just signed last year our two first offtake agreements of SAF for a total of 1.6 million tons of SAF, which will be delivered to us actually as of this year. And with those offtake agreements, we cover or we secure 1/3 of our 2030 needs. So it means that, of course, the journey is not finished, and we are working hard to secure the two other third of this target.
This is really ambitious, Vincent. Thank you for giving such a detailed overview. Now, the EU, of course, has mandated 6% SAF coming up. You know, there are 20,000 aircraft in the air today. Boeing tells me it's going to be 40,000 by 2040, 2050. This means the demand is going to be a lot for this SAF. We've seen airlines investing in SAF startups, airlines like United just ordering lots of future SAF stock. How are you going to get there?
Well, that's the key challenge for us and in general, indeed, for the airline industry. If you look at the French aviation sector CO2 emissions trajectory in the years to come until 2050, an exercise that we just concluded with all the actors in France at the beginning of the year, what is very interesting to note, to have in mind, is that by 2050, if you combine all levers that are fleet renewal, eco-piloting, electric aircraft, liquid hydrogen aircraft, you of course mitigate a lot the emissions of the sector, but you arrive at 2050 while maintaining more or less the CO2 emissions at the same level of 2019. And we know, facing the climate urgency, that maintaining emissions at 2019 levels will not be enough, because airline industry, like any other sectors in the years to come, will have to drastically reduce the absolute value of its emissions. And that's exactly where SAF has such an important role, because it has to enable to go to a decreasing and strongly reducing trend in terms of absolute CO2 emissions. So that's both the full potential of SAF and at the same time the big challenge, because as you said, today the production is nascent, but that's exactly why all these initiatives, you mentioned some SAF investment funds, investments in R&D projects. I mentioned the offtake agreements that we just signed at the end of last year. All those initiatives are absolutely critical to show by the airlines, from the industry, a clear demand signal. And with this demand signal, this will, and we start to see it very clearly, this will trigger the development on the production. This will trigger the scaling up of the production that the whole industry will need in order to reach ambitious but necessary climate targets.
That's fantastic. And thank you for sharing how we hopefully will meet the demand here. The other aspect is, of course, price. Currently, sustainable aviation fuel costs anywhere from 3 times to 6 times the price of normal Jet A fuel. One, how do you expect this price to come down, and how soon? Because if it's not commercially viable, it's very hard to sustain. And secondly, who is going to pay for this green premium? Is this cost, you believe, Air France will foot itself, or is this cost that will be passed on to customers, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, yet another big challenge for us, of course. On your first question, we expect, and we see that as well in the forecast of the different players, that yes, mechanically, as the production will increase, the unit price of SAF will decrease. But all the projections are convergent to the fact that it will remain a significant premium will remain between fossil kerosene and SAF. So hence the key question on the price and the capacity of airlines to buy those SAF, especially when you know that 20 to 30% of the cost of an airline today consists in jet fuel. So, and the answer to your second point, how can we manage to absorb those costs? What we see is that because you can of course think, well, it's easy. Airlines will just have to pay this overcost on to their customers. But the issue with that is that if some airlines do so because of regulation, especially in Europe, or because of voluntary ambitions, voluntary targets, which in our case go beyond the mandates, as we are a global industry and as on the same origin and destination, you are competing with a whole range of other airlines. If an airline passes those SAF over costs on the ticket price and not competitors, then you quickly run into competitive risk and in risk in shifting traffic in other companies or in other hubs. That's exactly why what we see, what we analyze, and what we are convinced of is that the path has to encompass a mechanism to help to support the airlines to cover those overcosts, exactly what exists actually in the US today. And we are quite vocal on sharing this example, this practice of the US, where we see that it, of course, mechanically helps support airlines to buy and cater for those overcosts, and also, in general, it is quite efficient in scaling up the whole ecosystem.
Thank you, Vincent. We've spoken about intermodality. We have spoken in depth about sustainable aviation fuel. The other exciting feature is, of course, looking farther out into the future, 2040, 2050. Is Air France seriously evaluating electric or hydrogen or any other future aircraft concepts?
Absolutely. And we are not only supporters of those new technologies because they will be part definitely of they will play a critical role in the decarbonization of the sector at different time scales. For example, when we talk about liquid hydrogen, more and more specialists are talking more about commercialization, scale up, more in the second part of the century. So we are supporting definitely those technologies, and we are strongly monitoring those evolutions, knowing as well that those technologies will address different segments, different flight typologies. As you know, electric and liquid hydrogen aircraft are fit short and medium haul distances. Then when it comes to Air France decarbonization roadmap, 80%, 80, of our total carbon footprint is focused, is localized on our long-haul operations because it's the typology of the network that we use, because we are a network carrier. So 80% is on long haul. And on long haul, as you know, so far, of course, we hope that it can come one day, but so far in the next decades, there are no projects of electric, hybrid, or liquid hydrogen aircraft. Hence, again, the importance of SAF, which will be a key solution and let's say the only available solution for long-haul operations on top of fleet renewal today and in the decades to come. So it shows that in terms of priority of decarbonization levers, because 80% of our emissions are on long haul, SAF is definitely the number one priority for us now and in the years and decades to come.
Airbus, of course, is also working on this hydrogen concept aircraft. Is that something that you are looking into as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, for our short and medium haul operations, such solutions, and of course, we know that there are many challenges to overcome, but we also see a strong implication on this project. On our short and medium haul network tomorrow, and hopefully as soon as possible, such technology will be or can be quite beneficial for us in our decarbonization trajectory.
Okay, I'm glad to hear this as well. Now, because you're in France, you have the rare privilege of being the target of climate activists more than many other airlines in the world. Airlines have been accused of greenwashing when we promote our decarbonization efforts, and oftentimes airlines become circumspect and they don't want to share much, and they go from greenwashing to green hushing. But it is important to communicate what is being done. How do you deal with climate change activists and the accusations of greenwashing in the airline industry?
Well, first of all, I fully relate to what you just said. When we discuss with our customers, especially our customers, and also, of course, with our employees, they regularly tell us, we don't know enough what your concrete efforts are, what your concrete actions are, your commitments that we know, but we want to know more in details what you do and what we can, as your customers, do right now. So the solution in all this context that you mentioned is not to communicate less on sustainability. It's actually to communicate maybe even more. Having said that, I think it's important to realize that my personal conviction is that you don't communicate on sustainability, or you should not communicate on sustainability like you communicate, let's say, on traditional levers or traditional aspects of your offer, like aircraft, like seats, like product on board. And for me, that's our philosophy, at least at Air France, that the key of, let's say, a communication on sustainability at the level of the stakes, this communication has to be rigorous, it has to be science-based, it has to be honest and humble, because, as we said, the challenges ahead of us and for all airlines are quite high. There are still a lot of uncertainties, or at least challenges to overcome. And this communication has to be transparent. I think, as you say, in France, you see that in other countries, but maybe particularly in France, large public, and of course this is driven by specialists, by opinion leaders, are more and more mindful, are more and more mature when it comes to CO2 footprint, when it comes to sustainability. And so it means that they are also more and more demanding on the level of precision, on the accuracy of the information that you share. So that's exactly what we are trying to do. And last, I would say, and that's my personal view, and related to French context, yes, we are, or we have been in the past, and we surely will be in the future. We are pushed hard by some NGOs, some associations. Sometimes we can have the feeling that it's unfair versus the reality of the actions and of our commitment. But at the same time, that's my personal conviction, it prompts us as well to be, even more active, to be always as precise and as transparent as possible in our communication. And at the end, I would see that as something positive, because, the topic we are talking about, climate change, environmental transition, is so important and that will drive so much the future of our way of living, of our societies more and more in the future, that it deserves to be, those problematics deserve to be treated with high standards of quality.
Well, thank you for your frank and open answer there, Vincent. I appreciate that you did not shy away from that question there. Now, one of the current efforts that is quite commendable about Air France is your participation in the SkyTeam Sustainable Flight Challenge. You participated in 2022. You are participating in 2023. Can you tell us a little about Air France's participation and why the Sustainable Flight Challenge by SkyTeam matters so much to the airline?
The main reason why, for me, and we will go in the details, but for me, the key message or the key both purpose and benefit of the SkyTeam Flight Challenge is to demonstrate that, again, a bit like what I said in terms of communication, sustainability is a particular topic where we have to have all collectively a certain mindset. And this mindset should be among airlines to prompt and to enhance cooperation even more than competition. And I think that in the root of the SkyTeam Flight Challenge, it's the willingness to profoundly collaborate, share practices among airlines which want to make a difference in the airline sustainability roadmap and especially decarbonization. So for me, that's what passionates me most about the Sustainable Flight Challenge. Also, as you probably know, this initiative has been actually proposed by to SkyTeam by our colleagues and friends at KLM. So I think a big thumbs up to them, highly deserved, because it was a brilliant idea, and we, next to being a brilliant idea, for the second year now that we are doing this challenge, we see that it's fantastic energy and results that we are getting all together, all the SkyTeam partners, and hopefully not only SkyTeam partners, also if it can inspire, if other airlines outside of the alliance can get something from that, it's of course beneficial to the whole industry.
Yeah, I think that is what's most encouraging for me as well. The cooperation attitude within airlines that traditionally would have competed, not you and KLM, but still airlines that may not have cooperated are working together to make operations and flying more sustainable today, and that's really encouraging for me. What was something that you are doing differently in 2023 based on lessons you learned from the Sustainable Flight Challenge in 2022?
In 2022, I will not detail all the actions because there were a lot taken by Air France. And it was really a fantastic adventure, a fantastic laboratory as well, to test, first of all, to drive bottom-up ideas really from the teams in the different departments involved. So to come with this whole series of ideas, to test concrete things that we had in mind but never tested operationally on a flight. So that was last year a great adventure, and that was, of course, why we were all collectively super enthusiastic, and all my colleagues super enthusiastic to do it again in 2023. I think last year, one of the main outcomes and benefits that we took out of the challenge was that we were able, combining SAF incorporation, new generation aircraft on the flights that we selected, eco-piloting measures going really at the maximum of our capacity. We did something that was quite enlightful as well to our own teams, but externally. On the 2 flights that we selected, we managed to decrease our CO2 emissions by more than 50%. And that is very important, I think, because the external world, our customers, sometimes they can be a bit lost in the objectives of the industry, of the airlines, by a horizon of time that can differ. They can sometimes doubt that if those commitments will become reality. So last year, what was interesting is that already in 2022, very concretely on 2 flights, we managed to divide by 2 our CO2 emissions. And I think that was important, that was powerful to show concretely that, when you are talking about SAF, when you are talking about fleet renewal, you are not talking science fiction. You are talking about concretely, tangibly reachable CO2 emissions reduction. So for me, that was maybe the number one outcome of the challenge last year. This year, and I will not go through all the details, but we continue, of course. So we are going full stretch on electric, let's say, operations of vehicles on the ground, boosting even more than last year all our eco-piloting measures, of course, consistent and going actually even further in terms of SAF incorporation this year. What is new this year compared to, for Air France, compared to the challenge last year, is that we will include in the 2 operations something that we have been working and that we are working hard, which is of course a very important aspect to tackle our whole climate impact, is that we will work on anticipating and analyzing post-flight what we call the non-CO2 impact of our operations, especially the contrails formation. And we will do so especially with our flights this year through a strong cooperation that we have with Météo France, the national French meteorological institute. And this partnership that we have for now more than 2 years, it will become material, visual, let's say, on the flights of the challenge this year.
This is very, very exciting indeed. Now, there's a lot of work that is happening today. You have, of course, shared overarching plans for Air France, from sustainable aviation fuel to hydrogen and electric aircraft coming. What gives you the most hope about the net zero future of aviation?
I will not talk to you about technology, about SAF and the production that we see clearly now that we are in the next phase, and that we are at a turning point, that the announcement of new plans is really emerging very fast. So I think that gives us a lot, it must give us a lot of confidence and also prompt us for even further action. So I will not tell you about all those aspects which are progressing quickly and positively, but I will tell you, that's my sincere answer, maybe what brings me the most confidence and enthusiasm is the energy and the engagement of our own colleagues, of our own staff. I think that, and a bit related to what you said earlier, being or as a staff of an airline in a sector which has been in the past years and continue to be scrutinized vis-à-vis its carbon footprint. And we can understand that because, yes, the stakes are high for this hard-to-abate sector. Some colleagues, I'm exchanging with some colleagues, I could feel that they were a bit not at ease in the past years vis-à-vis this scrutiny, that again they could sometimes judge unfair the treatment or the image of the airline sector. But my experience and also what with my colleagues in sustainability within Air France we have been trying to do to explain the problematics of the environmental transition, to better explain the concrete challenges, opportunities for airline industry to decarbonize, to explain the concrete levers for Air France. When you inform well and engage well your staff on all those problematics, what you see at the end, and I think that's with the SkyTeam Flight Challenge, we see that material in the operations is really a fantastic energy by the teams themselves. And again, I'm not talking of sustainability teams. I'm talking about teams from ground operations to in-flight colleagues in the ground to our cockpit and cabin crew. You see a huge amount of energy and huge amount of engagement, and that our colleagues just want to act to the maximum of their capacity. They want to act and to interact with their colleagues in other airlines, with our customers, and with external parties, because they are very conscious that it's by essence collective challenge that we all face when it comes to decarbonize the airline sector, but that at the same time it's a fantastic adventure, and that it's also a source of purpose, of sense that they can find in their daily job, and it gives me and them, I think, a very strong motivation now and in the years to come.
Thank you so much, Vincent. I'm glad to end on such a high note. And like I said, cooperation is what gives me so much hope. And it's not just within the airline; it's across airlines and across the industry. That it's like you said, it's happening across operations and not just the people dealing with sustainability. Everyone's working on it. The entire industry and individuals within the company are working on it. Thank you so much. Now, the final part of this interview, Vincent, is what I call the rapid fire round, in which we get to know you a bit more personally. So there are simple questions like, what's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie, so I have a lot, but maybe something that I'm rewatching right now. It's not a movie exactly, sorry. It's more a series. It's called Our Planet, which I strongly advise you, and which every time that I see it, it reminds me of the beauty and the magic of nature. And it also recalls me or reminds me why I'm working in sustainability, to do my utmost with all the teams to protect it as much as we can.
I think this is the David Attenborough
Exactly.
series on Netflix. Yes, it's absolutely stunning.
Absolutely.
For those who have not watched it. I've watched a couple of episodes, and you're absolutely right. Highly encouraged viewing for anyone listening to this podcast or reading this book. What's your favorite book on that note?
My favorite book, or at least one of my favorites, it's called The Elegance of the Hedgehog. So this time, nothing to do with sustainability, but a book that I read a couple of years ago, and that struck me by the quality and by its depth. And it was written by a novelist called Muriel Barbery, for your information. Strongly advised.
Fantastic. I'm just checking it out. It seems like it's a movie as well, so I definitely will check it out now. Now, you have, of course, worked and lived around the world. What is your favorite city, Vincent?
Yeah, that's a very tricky question, and I hope that my friends and former colleagues in other cities, which I will not mention, will not resent me for that. But I would say, because I lived in Rome, I lived in Mexico City, I lived in Manila, but I think I would say Montreal.
Montreal?
Yeah.
Fantastic. I used to live very close to Montreal in Ottawa, and Montreal was my big international airport. So I would agree, it's one of the most charming cities I have been to myself. That's great to know. What about what is something that you want to learn?
Sorry, it's not original, and we come back to my position, but I want to learn, and I do effort every week and every day to learn more about the ecological transition. And that's also one exciting part of my job, is that I continue to learn every day, because the stakes, but also the solutions are so numerous in the different sectors that I try to inform and to document myself on all the trends. And also because, and I think it's very important to have in mind in terms of environmental transition, at the end, all the solutions that we have to bring collectively have to be systemic, because you cannot adapt one solution which is good for one aspect of the environmental challenges, or good for one sector and detrimental to other aspects. So this holistic view is absolutely key when it comes to ecological transition. So that's why I want to learn, and I try to do my best to learn every day on the ecological transition.
Wow. Okay. You're truly living the dream then in this new role at Air France. What do you do in your free time, Vincent?
I try to, so I spend a lot to read on ecological transition, to listen to podcasts and so on, but less related to sustainability, and that's also a passion of mine. But I try to read and listen to podcasts as well on philosophy, because of course, like everybody at school, I was very interested, fascinated by philosophy in general. I lost a bit track in my professional domain on those aspects. At the end, they are so important and driving so much who we are, our place as well in communities and in the world in general. That I'm extremely interested and passionate by that. And actually, you can also make some very interesting links between, let's say, philosophical thoughts and environmental transition. So I come back to that, but there are also some very interesting links between those.
Interesting. Is there any favorite podcast you would recommend on the topic?
Yes, but I'm afraid they are a bit French focused. But I strongly advise, and I'm not sure that you can find some English recording, maybe with subtitles, but a French philosopher called André Comte-Sponville, which I find quite fascinating in its approach and in the values as well that he has and that you can find in his works.
The only French philosopher I have read and heard of late is Emmanuel Macron. And my French is un petit peu, so it doesn't go too far. and finally, Vincent, what is the best advice you've received?
It's a very personal one, actually, more linked to the way I am or I work. So the English translation would be, I think, better is the enemy of good. Le mieux est l'ennemi du bien. And why it's a nice advice for me personally, because I can have the tendency to do things very much in details and as perfect as they can be. But sometimes, you are more efficient to not control everything and just deliver good results. And that might be particularly relevant as well for everything that we do in sustainability, when you think that what counts and what is probably the most important is to act right now. And sometimes you can do mistakes, you learn from them, but our capacity, and to make the final link with your introduction as well, yes, we have to act at the maximum of our capacities, not only in 10 years, in 30 years, but right now. And so, yes, in this sense, that might be the best advice that I receive and that I try to apply on a daily basis.
Fantastic, Vincent. This was a fantastic chat. I really appreciate you opening up and elaborating on all answers, not skimping on any of the issues. I truly appreciated speaking with you and your insights, and I do wish you all the best in leading Air France, one of the largest airlines in Europe and the world, to getting to net zero. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for the chat. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air. Aviation is one of the hardest to decarbonize industries, yet there are multiple paths to get to net zero. Awareness is key to a green future. So please give us your support to help our sustainable aviation insights reach a wider audience. You can do this by sharing this episode on your network, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or even WhatsApp. Or perhaps you might consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this episode. You can start a conversation with us by writing to us at podcast@simpliflying, that's simply with an i.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website green.simpliflying.com and join the movement. Sustainability in the Air is an original podcast by Simpliflying. The show is produced by Juraj Toth in Slovakia. Dirk Singer is our Director of Sustainability, who leads research for each interviewee out of Greenwich, UK. Shubhadeep Pal is our supervising editor based out of Mumbai and Singapore. The articles are written by Ayushi Badola in Dehradun in India and Meera Hull in Montreal, Quebec. Creative design is led by Lihia Esteve in Montreal. Baiba Drimain is the project director for the show based out of Valencia, Spain. Special thanks to Wendy Sim in Singapore. And I'm Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying and your host. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.